The Sengoku period is generally considered to have begun following the Onin War, with the fragmentation of central control into a series of localised conflicts amongst the numerous clans. Kinai and its centre Kyoto bore the brunt of the fighting in the Onin War, and they were to get no respite. Despite the conflict's conclusion, the Hatekeyama rivals continued to be at odds with each other. In 1485, Hatekeyama Yoshinari invaded Yamashiro province, before his brother Masanaga halted him. They pillaged the area, therefore making enemies with the locals. This led to southern Yamashiro forming an Ikki that forced the withdrawal of the Hatekeyama rivals who had ravaged their homeland. The Ikki grew into a self-governing body with a constitution, which they called a Sengoku. However, the Sengoku was run by warriors who soon got on the wrong side of the peasants themselves, contributing to its collapse in 1493. Ikki continued throughout the Sengoku period, and they even came to control provinces. They were not just restricted to peasants, as shown by the Ikko Ikki. The name Ikko Ikki derives from the Ikko, also known as the Jodo Shinsu school of Buddhism, which was involved in the uprisings. An example of an Ikko Ikki was the Kaga Ikko Ikki. The school had helped Kaga Shugo, Togashi Masachika, come back to power after his brother removed him in 1473. However, they soon became dissatisfied with him, seeing a rebellion in 1474 crushed. Despite this failure, in 1487 they staged another uprising, which was successful. It resulted in the overthrow of Masachika, who committed seppuku in 1488. The Ikko Ikki was the dominant force in the province until Oda Nobunaga's campaigns around a century later. The Ikki were a strong example of the decentralisation that defined the Sengoku period. But it wasn't just Ikki that became independent from central control. Clans did too. One of these is the Hojo clan in Kanto. They display the nature of the daimyo in the Sengoku period, who were from both established Shugo families and, as in the case of the Hojo, rose the ranks. The later Hojo clan, despite bearing the same illustrious name as the rulers of the Kamakura Bakufu, were of entirely separate lineage. Originating as a junior branch of the Issei clan, they had served the Imagawa clan before expanding under the ambitious leadership of Hojo Soon. By 1493 he had gained control over Izu province, later sweeping into Sagami province, securing both Odawara, which would become their formidable stronghold, and the historic city of Kamakura. His successor, Hojo Ujitsuna, continued the expansion, pushing into Musashi province, which resulted in the capture of the future centre of shogunal rule, Edo Castle, from the Uesugi clan. Ujitsuna's son, Hojo Ujiyasu, had been one of the Sengoku daimyo to utilise their revolutionary new weapons that were firearms. These weapons arrived in Japan due to unforeseen circumstances in 1543, when the Portuguese encountered the island of Tanegashima, after their ship had been blown far off course from its route along the coast of China. Aboard were these new weapons, which soon spread nationwide. Another Sengoku daimyo who adopted these new weapons was the formidable Oda Nobunaga. Yet before Nobunaga's birth, the Oda were a disunited clan, with branches of the family based in different areas of Owari province. The two main branches were the Iwakura Oda in northern Owari, and the Kyosu Oda in southern Owari. These branches held the title of Shugodai, deputies to the Shugo. Nobunaga's family was a cadet branch of the Kyosu Oda. His father, Oda Nobuhide, worked to expand the branch's control within Owari, even taking what he renamed as Nagoya Castle from the Imagawa clan in 1532. However, Nobuhide was not always victorious in conflict. He tasted defeat in the 1547 Battle of Kaneguchi by Saito Dosan, a man whose life story embodied the social mobility that was characteristic of the Sengoku period. Dosan had risen from humble origins as an oil merchant to take control of Mino province in 1544 in an act of Gekkokujo. After Nobunaga succeeded his father in 1551, he embarked on a series of campaigns that would unite the fractured clan. One of these conflicts was in 1554, when the Kyosu Oda killed the Shugo, after he had notified Nobunaga of a plot against his life, from the Kyosu Oda. Nobunaga responded by sending an army against them, scoring a decisive victory. Severely weakened, they were completely defeated in 1555, when Nobunaga captured Kiyosu Castle. In this melee, Oda Nobutomo, leader of the Kyoto Oda, committed seppuku. With the castle now in his control, Nobunaga established it as his new capital. Nobunaga's consolidation of power also brought him into conflict with his brother Nobuyuki. Nobuyuki had been a rival for the succession of their father, and remained a thorn in his side. In 1555, their brother Oda Hidetaka was shot accidentally by his uncle Nobutsugu, who subsequently fled the province. This triggered a scramble between Nobunaga and Nobuyuki for control over Nobutsugu's castle Moriyama. A compromise placed control of the castle in the hands of their shared half-brother, but the rivalry flared up again the following year when Nobunaga won a significant victory at the Battle of Ino. After the battle, a number of Nobuyuki's allies, such as Shibata Katsui, submitted to Nobunaga, and they were forgiven by the budding warlord. Nobuyuki did not receive the same forgiveness in 1558. Nobunaga tricked him into coming to Kiyosu Castle, where he was killed. With this threat eliminated, Nobunaga moved against the Iwakura Oda, who were led by his cousin Oda Nobukata. Nobunaga won a major victory in 1558 at the Battle of Ukino, and captured Iwakura Castle in 1559, therefore cementing his position as leader of the Oda, setting the stage for his ambitions beyond Owari. Nobunaga's power only grew in the years that followed his unification of the Oda. In 1560 he dealt a stunning blow to the Imagawa clan at the Battle of Okehazama. The Imagawa were one of the more powerful houses, controlling the strategically significant provinces of Totomi, Suruga and Mikawa in the Tokaido region, a chain of provinces from Kinai to Kanto. Their leader, Imagawa Yoshimoto, made the fateful decision to march on Kyoto. To fulfill this mission, he had to go through Owari. The Imagawa forces heavily outnumbered Nobunaga's modest army, with Imagawa vassals such as Matsudaira Motoyasu supporting the offensive. Oda defeat seemed a foregone conclusion. The invaders toppled fortifications that confronted the Imagawa assault. Motoyasu captured Marune Fort, and Washizu also fell. Faced with this seemingly hopeless situation, Nobunaga gathered his troops and set out to fight the Imagawa force. Before setting off, he is said to have recited some of the no play, Atsumori. Lines included asking if there is any form of life which does not die. Meanwhile, the Imagawa had settled in the Dengaku Hazama Gorge near the village of Okehazama, pausing to recuperate and celebrate after their initial successes. Nobunaga approached his encamped enemy, and moving under the cover of a thunderstorm, staged a devastating ambush that tore through the Imagawa, the chaos seeing the beheading of Imagawa Yoshimoto himself. Matsudaira Motoyasu's clan had long been bound to the Imagawa. Motoyasu's father, Hirotada, came under the Imagawa's protection as a child, establishing the vassal relationship that remained under his son. Motoyasu himself had been a hostage of the Imagawa in his youth, and was the husband of Yoshimoto's niece. Therefore, Yoshimoto's death presented an opportunity to free his clan from their grasp, which the young warlord seized. In 1561, against the advice of some of his advisors, he forged an alliance with Nobunaga, a pact that would last for the remainder of Nobunaga's life and propelled the Matsudaira to a position of national prominence. The Matsudaira were descendants of the prestigious Saiwa Genji, their branch tracing its lineage to a figure called Tokugawa Yoshisui. To finalise his break from servitude, Motoyasu changed his name to Ieyasu. Moto had originated from Imagawa Yoshimoto, so he changed the first character of his name from Moto to I, drawn from his Minamoto ancestor, Minamoto no Yoshi. Nobunaga now turned his attention to Mino province. His father-in-law, Saito Dosan, the man who had defeated Oda Nobuhide at Kaneguchi, died in 1556 at the Battle of Nagaragawa, fighting against his son, Yoshitatsu. By 1561, Mino had passed into the hands of Yoshitatsu's son, Tatsuoki. Over the coming years, Nobunaga took advantage of Tatsuoki's poor governance to launch repeated attacks on the province. The decisive blow was struck in 1567 when he launched a campaign that culminated in the capture of Inabayama Castle, their formidable fortress perched atop a mountain. However, Nobunaga's forces overcame this obstacle, largely due to the ingenuity of a rising figure within his ranks, the man who would come to be called Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi enlisted a local, Horio Yoshiharu, to help guide a small force up to the castle through a hidden route. This was successful and the castle was breached, securing control over the province for Nobunaga. Following his victory, Nobunaga established Inabayama Castle as his new headquarters and renamed it Gifu Castle. From its commanding height, he would project his power further across Japan. With the addition of Mino to his territories, Nobunaga had the power and ability to advance on Kyoto. He aimed to install Ashikaga Yoshiaki as shogun. Yoshiaki had fled Kyoto after his brother, Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru, was killed in 1565 during an attempt to depose him by the Miyoshi clan and Matsunaga Hisehide, daimyo of Yamato province. Separating Nobunaga's lands and Kyoto lay Ise and Omi provinces. He moved through northern Ise before swiftly defeating the Rokkaku clan in southern Omi. Ironically, the Rokkaku had been one of the clans to whom Yoshiaki had turned for protection after fleeing Kyoto, but they had tried to kill him instead. With these victories, Nobunaga's path to the historic capital was clear, entering Kyoto with tens of thousands of troops in November 1568, installing Yoshiaki as shogun. However, Nobunaga soon grew frustrated with the new shogun, as he began to act increasingly independently. Nobunaga's lands continued to grow after the successful march to Kyoto. He quickly moved to control Kinai and its surrounding provinces. The next on the list was Echizen. However, this campaign would prove far more challenging. In 1570, the ruler of Echizen, Asakura Yoshikage, did not attend a meeting of daimyo in Kyoto that Nobunaga had convened as a test of loyalty. As a result, Nobunaga launched an offensive into Echizen, through northern Omi, territory held by the Azai under Azai Nagamasa. The Azai and Asakura clans had been traditional allies, and this bond prevailed over the marriage alliance between the Oda and Azai. The clan's leaders were brothers-in-law through Nagamasa's marriage to Nobunaga's sister. The Azai's intervention made Nobunaga's position tenuous, forcing him to withdraw, his retreat being covered by Ieyasu and Hideyoshi. But the war was far from over, for Nobunaga soon came back with fury, advancing to Yokoyama Castle on the banks of the river Anegawa, close to the Azai's base of Adani Castle. The Azai and Asakura came to meet him, taking up positions on the opposite bank of the river, instigating the Battle of Anegawa. The battle was won by Nobunaga, who was supported by Ieyasu with 5,000 troops, and they played a key role in the clash. However, it was only a Pyrrhic victory. Both opposing clan leaders escaped, and Nobunaga came close to losing his life. I have referred to the Matsudaira forces and clan in the last segment of the video. However, by now Ieyasu was not Matsudaira Ieyasu, but Tokugawa Ieyasu. He had received the emperor's permission to assume the surname Tokugawa, stressing his links to the Saiwa Genji. On the topic of the Tokugawa clan, Nobunaga was not the only daimyo to have expanded his territory in this turbulent epoch. Ieyasu and Takeda Shingen from Kai province forged an opportunistic alliance against the Imagawa, who had not yet recovered from their rout at Okehazama. Ieyasu advanced into and took Totomi province, while Shingen invaded Suruga province. The Takeda attack on Suruga prompted the Hojo to repudiate their alliance and help the Imagawa against Shingen. The expansion of this conflict led to Shingen entering Sagami province in 1569, attacking the Hojo capital of Odawara. However, within 2 years the Takeda and the Hojo reconciled and re-established their alliance. This meant that Shingen was free to turn his attention westward, toward the territories of Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu. At this time, Nobunaga was already faced with countless enemies: the Azai, the Asakura, and the Ikuiki. In the winter of 1572, a new storm gathered. Takeda Shingen, the fabled Tiger of Kai, attacked Ieyasu. He swept through the rugged mountain valleys into northern Totomi, capturing Futamata Castle. Ignoring his retainer's advice, Ieyasu sought to meet Shingen in battle. Determined to punish the man who had invaded his domains, he marched to face the veteran warlord at Mikatagahara. Even with Oda reinforcements, Ieyasu commanded fewer forces than Shingen. As the battle progressed, Shingen was able to attack them from behind, forcing the Tokugawa into a retreat. Ieyasu had wanted to die alongside his battered army, but Natsume Masayoshi, having rushed from the Tokugawa capital Hamamatsu Castle after news of the perilous situation spread, urged him to leave for their capital. The Tokugawa suffered a crushing defeat at Mikatagahara, and Ieyasu came perilously close to losing his life. One Takeda assailant supposedly came so close to Ieyasu that the daimyo shot him personally. When the Takeda reached Hamamatsu, they found that the gates of the castle were wide open and concluded that there must be a trap. Therefore they did not assault the castle and set up camp instead. Though devastated at Mikatagahara, the Tokugawa at Hamamatsu launched raids on the Takeda camp, creating an appearance of strength. As a result, the Takeda withdrew to return the next year, when they captured Noda Castle. However, thankfully for Ieyasu and Nobunaga, before the Tiger of Kai could deal any further damage, Shingen's health took a turn for the worst, dying in April 1573. Takeda Shingen was just one of Nobunaga's many enemies. In the years between Anagawa and Mikatagahara, Nobunaga had been locked in a struggle against the Ikuiki. The driving force behind the Ikuiki was the Honganji branch of Jodo Shinto Buddhism, centered in Osaka at the Ishiyama Honganji Temple. In late 1570, this temple successfully resisted Nobunaga. Nobunaga also attacked the Enryakuji Temple on Mount Hiei. Though not affiliated to the Ikuiki, as they were members of the Tendai school of Buddhism, not that of Jodo Shinto, the monks there had supposedly crossed Nobunaga by aiding the Azai and the Asakura. Therefore, Nobunaga decided to attack the temple in 1571 in a highly controversial decision that met opposition even from the emperor himself. He burned the site, causing the destruction of many historic artifacts, and Oda forces killed many of those living there, including women and children. This brutal campaign did little to gain favour among Buddhists, whose militants continued to be a thorn in Nobunaga's side, such as at the mouth of the Kiso River, where he was defeated at the first and second sieges of Nagashima. Another religion active in Japan at this time was Christianity, introduced through the work of Portuguese Jesuit missionaries. The first of these was Francis Xavier, who arrived in Kagoshima, southern Kyushu, in 1549. They struggled at first to enjoy much success, hindered by the language barrier, which led to significant misunderstandings. The missionaries had translated figures and concepts to what appeared to be a Buddhist equivalent. God was translated to Dainichi, a Buddhist deity. However, this meant that the Japanese thought that the missionaries were members of an unorthodox Buddhist sect, rather than a separate religion. This highlighted the need for the missionaries to learn Japanese. In 1550, Xavier set off for Kyoto in an attempt to meet who he called the King of Japan, but his mission was unsuccessful. He did, however, find success elsewhere. In 1551, Uchi Yoshitaka gave him permission to preach in Yamaguchi. Xavier left Japan the following year, but the Jesuit mission continued. In 1559 there were 6 missionaries in the nation, including Gaspar Villela. In the first half of the 1560s, the missionaries achieved a number of successes. In 1560, Villela met Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru, who ordered that the missionaries should be able to go about their work freely, In 1563 they secured their first daimyo convert, Omura Sumitada, and in 1565 Villela attended a New Year event with the shogun. The future looked bright. Returning to politics, by 1573 Nobunaga's relationship with shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki had soured beyond repair. Yoshiaki, a beneficiary of Nobunaga's rise, had turned against him, conspiring with Takeda Shingen and other hostile elements. After the shogun staged multiple rebellions in 1573, Nobunaga decided to act against Yoshiaki. He overthrew the shogun and left the post vacant. With Yoshiaki's fall, the Ashikaga shogunate came to an end, taking the Muromachi period with it and ushering in the Azuchi Momoyama period.